This was a bucket list level of mine for years. Ever since I joined the community, I wanted to beat this level, so the fact that I've beaten it now is insane. For a grand total of 7,029 attempts, I will say that this is probably a bit higher of an attempt count than I expected for a level of this difficulty, but 4,000 of my attempts were just practice runs that I did while warming up for Terminal Rampancy while I was grinding that. So my actual attempt count is probably closer to about 3,000, probably let's say 4,000 if I include learning attempts in there. So it's still pretty good. I'm not disappointed in it. This level is incredibly rough. It's a really old level at this point. It came out in like 2018, so it has a lot of issues that 2018 levels tend to have, especially for a Jakerz inspired level. But for what it is, I had a pretty good time with it. I honestly really enjoyed this level. It's definitely not for everyone. I can totally see a lot of people going for this level, not liking it at all because it's so janky. But personally, I had a really good time with it. Catharsis by VoltriX. Man, what a wild video to be making right now. Catharsis is a 2.1 level that came out during September of 2018. It came out whenever the hype surrounding levels like God Eater and Woodkid was at its highest. This level was meant to be a third level in that lineup of levels, and it was a level that was supposed to rival both God Eater and Woodkid in terms of decoration. I remember seeing previews for Catharsis all the way back in 2018, and I believe that this was the first extreme demon that I was ever super excited to see released to the public. The moment I saw the verification video for Catharsis, I knew at that moment that one day I was going to be a victor of this level, despite the fact that my hardest at the time was deadlocked. Unfortunately though, Catharsis never got rated. Looking at the level today, it's clear that the level really hasn't aged the best. The gameplay is incredibly rough and unpolished. The decoration is outdated and all over the place, and if it were released today, I doubt that it would have been rated at all. But for 2018, this level was stunning, and it was a community spectacle. For the time that it was released, this level pushed the boundaries of what the 2.1 editor could do, and its verification video even got the top news spot in C1997's G News series back in October 2018. So obviously, this level is incredibly nostalgic to me. It's a time capsule of my first years spent in the GD community, and to say that I'm now a victor of this level is genuinely a crazy feeling. And 14-year-old me would freak out knowing that in the future, he would beat Catharsis. Anyways, now that I got my history with this level out of the way, let's get into the gameplay. I think the best way to go about reviewing Catharsis is to go over some characteristics of the gameplay that stay consistent throughout the entire level before going into individual sections. First and foremost, good lord is this level consistent. That is really not something I was expecting to say about this level, because at a first glance, this level doesn't seem consistent at all. But I kid you not, the moment I started playing from 0%, I was instantly able to get to the 60s. And because of this level's sheer consistency, I actually had a really good time with it. I rarely ever found the level annoying due to the fact that, despite the level's issues and oddities, I would still be able to consistently get to the 60s no matter what. I will say though, this level is very janky. It's an extreme demon from 2018. It's bound to have several stereotypical issues that levels from that time period tend to have. However, to get into these issues, it's probably best to bring them up as they appear in the level, so I'm going to get into the actual level now. I'll be splitting up Catharsis into three main segments. The pre-drop are 0 to 30%, the drop 30 to 73%, and the post-drop 73 to 100%. And we'll go front to back, starting with the pre-drop. I honestly really liked the pre-drop of Catharsis, which isn't something I was expecting to say. It was fun, engaging, consistent, and probably contained the best parts of the level when it comes to pure playtesting. I think that 0 to 14% specifically is a great introduction to Catharsis. It's calm, collected, and fairly easy, meaning that while playing it, you can relax, calm your nerves, and prepare for your next attempt at the drop. It reminded me a lot of Fog's pre-drop in that aspect, and I absolutely loved Fog's pre-drop, so that's not an insult. I really appreciate when a pre-drop has the ability to just be chill, especially with levels like Catharsis or Fog where the drops are a significant portion of the level's difficulty. I think my only complaint with the first 14% would be the ball that starts at 11%, as that ball was a pretty big spike in difficulty thanks to some timings being off screen. Luckily though, the ball got consistent enough to the point where I really didn't struggle with it, meaning that it really didn't cause me any massive issues in the end. 14 to 30% I didn't like as much as the first 14%, but I still really enjoyed it. It was still a good part. I love the way the gameplay flows in this section, and despite it being kind of awkward towards the second half of the part, it was always decently consistent and really satisfying to get through. There were a handful of issues with this part though, one of these being the mini wave at 22%. In my opinion, this wave gap's a bit too tight when you compare it to the rest of the gameplay in this level, so it's kind of a choke point. Luckily for me though, I received a very nice skill boost from Terminal Rampancy a few weeks ago, so this wave really wasn't anything too bad for me, but I did figure it was still worth pointing out. out. But yeah, overall the pre-drop was really fun. It kept me engaged while also allowing me to de-stress after each far attempt, which is something that I absolutely love. Next up, we have the drop section, or 30 to 73%. This was easily the hardest part of Catharsis. The pre-drop and post-drop both pale in comparison to the difficulty of this section, but that's mainly due to only one of the parts contained within the drop. I'm going to talk about the other two parts first though. The first part of the drop is probably the most iconic part of Catharsis, or at least it's the part of the level that I immediately think of when anyone mentions this level. At a first glance, this part doesn't look like it plays very well. The biggest and most obvious drawback to this part is the boss fight, which blocks a large portion of the gameplay in this section. In almost any other scenario, I would immediately say that I strongly dislike blind gameplay. However, I really didn't find the obstructing decoration to be a big issue with this section. Despite how it may look, this part actually plays really well. It's all incredibly consistent, and whenever the gameplay is blind, it's incredibly forgiving, with most of the obstructed gameplay being some of the easiest parts of this section. And once you learn this part and run through it a couple times, you would genuinely never die to it from 0%. And it's fun, it's incredibly satisfying, it's actually my favorite part of the entire level. Moving on to the second part of the drop now, I really don't have much to say about this part as it's by far the easiest part of the drop. I will say that the 4 ships contained within this part all have pretty wonky transitions into them, and they do take some practice to get used to, but once you get them down, you'll basically never die to them. Other than those ship transitions though, this part is essentially completely free, which is great because it allows you to get to the hardest part of Catharsis really often. And speaking of the hardest part of Catharsis, here we are, 60 to 68%. Firstly, I want to say that this part looks stunning, especially for the time that it was built in. The movements of the structures throughout this part are mesmerizing, and the colors and detail on each structure are perfect. I love this part in this level so much. This was the part of the level that really drew me to Catharsis all the way back in 2018. Getting into the gameplay though, I really can't describe this part by calling it anything other than abhorrent. It starts off with a fairly awkward ship transition into an insanely tight ship gap, which I'll show you on screen right now. It's baffling how difficult that ship gap is. It's a complete punch to the gut, as pretty much every single part of the level before this was around the same difficulty, and then this part throws this gap at you. Unfortunately though, this part isn't done yet. After some extremely tight timings, including a really strange duel that was impossible at first but ended up getting shockingly consistent, we have 67 to 69%, which is utterly insane. The first cube click at 68% and the green orb at 69% are the tightest timings in the entire level by far. Now you may ask, what makes these cube timings so difficult? They look pretty open, especially the green orb. It didn't even look remotely difficult. Well, my friend, I have 2 words for you: invisible hitboxes. I have screenshots of each of these clicks to show you how ridiculously precise you have to be to not accidentally hit the invisible spikes surrounding these timings. As I said, this part is abhorrent. However, was this part really that bad to play? Not really. It was by far the hardest part of Catharsis for me, trumping any other piece of gameplay in this level by a mile. But once you figure out the nuance of this part, it's possible to get somewhat consistent with it. I personally never even hated this part as I went into it knowing that it was stupid, so I knew a high level of patience was required to pass this part from 0%, and luckily for me, I was able to be patient with this part the majority of the time. Finally, we have the post-drop. Just for simplicity's sake, I've decided to condense the entire post-drop into one singular section, as the entire post-drop plays pretty similarly and it's all basically the same difficulty, so it would just be easier to address it all as one section. In my opinion, the post-drop is the easiest portion of Catharsis. To be completely fair, it's really not that much easier than the pre-drop. That being said, it's extremely chokeable from 0% due to it being incredibly awkward in nature. It definitely contains some of the weirdest parts of the level to play, and of course has weird hitboxes, blind game modes and speed changes, and 2 choke points, those being the 76% wave click and the 92% transition. Now, despite these issues, and despite the fact that I got pretty unlucky with this section, dying 11 times past 72%, I would still say that this post-drop is pretty consistent overall. Again, if you learn how each part plays and you adjust to the nuance, besides 76 and 92%, the post-drop can basically be done every single attempt, which is something that I really like. Of course, I could definitely do without the awkwardness, and it's because of this awkwardness that I would definitely call the post-drop my least favorite part of the level, but I really don't hate this section or anything. It's fine. It's flawed and it's weird, but I love the way that it wraps this level up. And getting to it from 0% had a really nice intensity to it because it was directly after the hardest part of the level. And I will say, getting to the final wave from 0% felt amazing and made all of my deaths in the post-drop completely worth it in my opinion. Overall though, I like Catharsis. I like it a lot. I had a really good time with this level despite its glaring issues. 14-year-old me would lose his mind knowing that he would eventually beat this level. So being able able to record this review right now is a real treat due to how much this level means to me. If you're interested in Catharsis and you're willing to put up with the glaring issues that this level has, I would recommend that you give it a shot. The more victors this level receives, the more likely it is to get rated, and that would be a dream come true for me. So give it a shot if you're interested. However, if you don't think you can handle the unbalanced and unpolished nature of Catharsis, I definitely steer clear of this level. As for difficulty, I personally found this to be a bit harder than Athanatos. I can definitely say that it's easier than Zyrocappy as well, which puts this level between 610 and 660 on the AREDL. I feel pretty confident in that difficulty opinion, so if you're interested in this level, expect it to be around that difficulty. But yeah, that'll be it for Catharsis. Currently, I have 3 more reviews in the making as I've been on a bit of an extreme demon grind recently, so look forward to reviews on Terrorcore, Headlock, and Brooklyn Bloodpop. Bloodlust Rewind will also be releasing on my channel pretty soon, so there's going to be lots of activity on my channel within the coming weeks. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you all so much for watching, and y'all have a good one.